Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do another installment of the Motec tutorial where I take you guys from noob to pro. Today we're going to have a short discussion mainly just on dampers, and mainly it was just driven by a comment that I saw on the iRacing forum, the telemetry discussion, where somebody was asking me about damper histograms and something that I said in the previous videos. So I kind of put a little bit more thought into it, and then that kind of inspired me to make a new video. We're going to talk a little bit more about dampers and doing some more analysis that I kind of thought up. I put a little bit of more mental energy into it, and I think I came up with some cool stuff. How useful it'll be, I'm not exactly sure yet, but we're going to find out together. So we're going to do a little bit of experimenting. We're going to make some new maths, and maybe, if nothing else, I don't think that it's going to give us a magic graph that's going to let us know exactly what kind of damper settings we're going to need to put on the car, but maybe it'll give us a little bit more insight and understanding into the damper behavior and which direction at least one needs to go, or if you're close or whatnot to the ideal setup. So we'll start back on Motec. Again, this is going to be a really advanced video today, so if you haven't seen the previous parts, please go ahead and of course you're not up to speed. It definitely might be a little bit over the head of some folks, so I suggest that you watch the beginning of the tutorial, parts 1 and 2, to catch up to speed, and then you'll be a little bit better suited to watch this video. So let's go ahead and dive in. So I'm here at Motec again. This is my version 1.1. One thing I wanted to touch on before we go to that is about the driver analysis. I added a new tab here for driving line. And this is new to my worksheet, but I did actually finally end up adding the GPS information, and I'll show you how I did that real quick. So we're here at Spa clearly, and I've added the driving line, and it's very nice. And let's make a new one just to show you how. So first, you're gonna have to do some maths, because we are actually it always was exporting the latitude and longitude of the car, but it kind of needs to be reformatted into an input that the GPS map wants to use. So let me go to, I think maybe maths. Right, so this is the formula you're going to need to use. It's latitude degrees plus latitude minutes divided by 60. And plus latitude minutes fractional divided by 3600, which gives you the correct conversions. And then our units are angle and degree. Press OK. Similarly, longitude, GPS longitude, it's going to be longitude degrees plus longitude minutes over 60 plus longitude minutes fractional over 3600. So those are your two inputs. Then you're going to go to whatever worksheet, add. This is called the GPS track. And if you label your math channels this way, GPS latitude and GPS longitude, you don't have to make any changes. It'll already be on default. And then you can make your adjustments here, show caption, auto scale, selected laps, driver north, scale, point, line, color, map. The last thing that you want to do is show map as background. You put OK, and then retrieve now, and press OK, and boom, you have it. So let's see how well it works, and yep, it's pretty good. So you can overlay your laps, and look at your information, see how it's doing, how you did. So in this case, I've overlaid my ground speed with my, I've resized my screen so it kind of cuts off some of the text. Inverse corner radius. I'm hoping that the final resolution on this video is going to be a little bit better than the previous ones. But anyway, so I can use the scroll wheel on my mouse to kind of zoom in on different sections of the track. So you can see here my line on the exit of the hairpin at Spa. And you can see a difference in kind of a mistake on the exit of the hairpin. The entries were all at the same place, but you can see here where my minimum speed was at a different location, and then also the inverse corner radius was different. So now we actually have the visual of it, and you can see the different line and see how bad it was. Pretty neat. So I guess we won't do much more analysis on that. Let's see the final chicane. Yeah, so highlighting part of the track will help, and then you can see the line through the chicane. So that's a nice little feature to have, and I put it under my driving analysis tab. We'll go ahead and delete this. Okay, so let's go back to what we wanted to talk about, which was suspension histograms. I'll turn off these laps. So the histogram, I think, is pretty complete because of the fact that it shows you this highlighted region down the middle, which is supposed to delineate between high speed and low speed. So what you see here in the middle in the gray section, that's more of the low speed damping region, and then everything outside of it is for the high speed. And you can see that kind of what that means is that high speed covers everything, or the high speed adjustment covers the entire range of motion and will affect all of it, and the low speed in this tiny sliver is basically kind of almost like a fine adjustment, even though the way that I really use it is that I use my high speed adjustments mainly just to control the car's ride over bumps and trying to maximize grip over bumps, and I use my low speed adjustment to control the balance of the car and control the weight transfer. So if I'm trying to, maybe if I'm breaking up, if I'm locking up my brakes a little bit too much, or if maybe the car won't turn in as well, and I've run out of adjustments in other places, I may soften or speed up the front damping and reduce the front damping, so then the nose of the car will dive faster, putting more weight on the car, on the nose of the car much faster. That helps in that situation. The opposite would be that maybe the entry is a little bit too loose and I'm oversteering on entry, in which case I may want to slow down the weight transfer. On exit, I may want to improve my forward bite, where maybe I'm having wheel spin or having trouble on exit. Then you want the car to, as immediately once you go to throttle, squat down and transfer weight to the back. So then that's the case where you reduce some of the damping. You would reduce your front rebound, the slow front rebound, and you would reduce your rear slow compression, and then that would allow the car to rock back really quickly and squat and put all of its weight on the rear tires to improve your forward traction, assuming that you had a rear wheel drive car. So that's usually how I do it, but I guess sometimes it's still not exactly easy to see. Normally I think that should be at 25, maybe, or 15, 20. You can control that the size of that sliver and you can make adjustments to it. Oddly enough, I think I had seen it at higher levels previously in my old Motec perhaps. So that's an interesting. I'll have to double check, but I don't know if 10 should be the boundary for that. But if I make an adjustment to this number, it'll actually increase in width. So I feel like maybe I had seen some text that actually said that about 25 millimeters per second. We're gonna leave it at 20 for now, but I'm gonna double check that at some point. It's irrelevant. This is just a line that separates visually the slow from fast rebound, and kind of helps you see what you need to do. I'm also seeing that my number values for the damping is not being displayed. So I'm going to go ahead and make a couple adjustments to my fonts just to try to make things a little bit easier to see. Okay, so now we can actually see the numbers here. Okay, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to make some maths to kind of be able to visualize the damper velocity, kind of like the way that we're doing it here, but actually to separate it a little bit more. So what are we going to do? What am I talking about? The damper velocity is kind of all over the place when you look at it in a time distance graph. This is a useless mess, and there's nothing I can do with it. And the only way that you can display this and visualize it in any manner that's, comprehensible is the suspension histogram. But I still want to kind of separate these things, because right now it's still one plot, high speed and low speed, and I think in some cases it may be difficult to separate, and for some people to visually see that this is an adjustment that should be made to high speed adjustment or to low speed damping adjustment. So I want to separate the two. So we're going to make a new worksheet. We're going to delete this because this is worthless. And we're going to make some new maths. Now I had already started this. No, not that one. I found it. Okay, so what I made, and we're going to make some more of these, were these high speed. I separated the damper into high speed and low speed, and then after that I did some additional filtering. But let's start out with displaying a time distance graph, and we're going to add a couple channels. going to search for damper. And then we're going to go ahead and display. Do I want to show it yet? So you can see I made a plot of high speed bump and low speed bump, and this is for the front left wheel only. I think they're all kind of like, what's the difference actually between these? Alright, high speed rebound, high speed bump, low speed bump, low speed rebound, right. Okay, so then putting them together, you can see the entire plot. And it's all together. Now I'm going to go ahead and prove that this is what it is. So I guess we're going to do let's try to do the right front, and let's try to go through the process and do it from scratch. Let's just, actually, we'll clear all this. I'm going to go through the same naming convention. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this and start a new one. And we'll go here and we're going to delete that for now. It'll be for the front right. And we're not going to do high speed yet. We're just going to do damper, and we're going to call it that. And we're going to get rid of a couple of little conditions. So the way that you get, so basically I simplified the equation down to this format. The way that you get to this is, so we're going to rebrand this right now. Suspension position, and we're going to say high speed. And we're not going to change the units, even though that's not consistent. It should just be millimeters. But the way that we're going to separate the high speed and the low speed is we're going to use filters. And this is, so the way that I made this is you go here to the functions and you choose high speed filter, which is this one, filter HP underscore HP, and then you put your suspension velocity, suspension position inside of it. Well, I'll just make a new one right here. So it's filter, and then search for suspension, and we're looking for suspension position. We're going to look for the front right, so I need to edit that. Front right, and we'll put that in between the parentheses, and then you put a comma, and then you give it the cutoff frequency. So it's going to cut off everything below the frequency that you enter here. And you really kind of have to play with it, but 0.1 is what I'm going to put it to right now. So that's 1/10 of a hertz, and that's going to be the cutoff frequency for us. And similarly, we're going to make a new channel, and we're going to name it suspension position, low speed, front right, and then our units are going to be, they're supposed to be length, so we're going to just do this one correctly, millimeter. We're going to go suspension high speed, no, we're going to filter low speed, low. Right, comma, and then we're going to do the same cutoff frequency, 0.1. Okay. So we're used to, this is our normal suspension position graph, and you can see what I'm doing. What you can see here is that there are two frequencies. You can see that in general the line goes up, and it goes down, and it goes up, and it goes down, and within it you see an awful lot of oscillation. So what you're seeing is that all of this movement up, then down, then up and down, that's the rocking, pitching, rolling of the car, going through the turns, the nose diving down. That's all low speed. You can see the number of, you could say, cycles, 1, 2, well, the cycle you should only count the peaks. So maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, maybe 13 cycles for the lap of low speed. But then you see obviously the high speed, there's an awful lot of cycles for the length of the lap. So that's what we're trying to separate out. Let's see what it's going to look like. So we're going to add both our little channels here. And you see, this is the same thing, but we kind of separated out the frequency. So now you can see this is just the low speed motion. This is just the car diving. This is not this is not smoothed. This is filtered. So smoothing is different than filtering. In the smoothing case, all you're doing is essentially deleting information, reducing your sample size, and basically you're kind of like skipping over and not displaying some of these oscillations, so that's why you don't see it. They're kind of like lost forever. But when you filter, that's something different entirely, and it will yield different results. But with a smoothing case, you can never do this. So we essentially separated it. You can see the high speed has all the oscillations in it, but it also includes some of the low speed as well. Like it moves all of it is just pure motion, and the low speed adjustment just kind of removes the high frequency oscillation. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like in a histogram. We'll remove these. We'll add It doesn't display the low speed one for some reason. So yeah, I think it should be a 25, like the default showed. But you can see the high speed here. Well, that's kind of strange. Okay, well anyway, so that's useless right now. Anyway, so this proves that this plot that what we're showing is actually separating it. If I go and make adjustments to the filter frequency, let's say we play around with this and we go to 0.4. You'll see some of the high-speed oscillations show up on the low speed. So more and more of it will be transferred onto this one. So you can see that we are in the correct ballpark. Is this useful? No. This is just to show you guys that we are indeed, that the filters actually do work. We can go ahead and now delete these. And show you a little bit more complicated thing. So what I ended up doing is that I ended up separating not only the high speed and the low speed, then I took the derivative, because what we just showed was the suspension position. So I took a derivative and then brought out the velocity. So then that means that you have the high speed and the low speed velocity. And then after that, I wanted to separate it into rebound and compression. How do you do that? Well, I had to put a little bit of thought into it, but obviously it's quite simple. I mean, when the damper is compressing, that's what we call the bump. What's it doing? It has a velocity, a certain velocity, and then once it starts releasing, the velocity is going the other way. So I put a logical statement into the equation that basically what it says is that when the damper velocity, to look at the suspension position, and if your damper velocity is negative, in this case it has to be negative, then you're bumping, and then calculate the derivative of the suspension, which gives you the velocity. If not, it's invalid. So basically it's only going to display information when it's when the damper velocity is positive. In the case of the rebound, it's only going to display information when the suspension velocity is negative or is positive, and then that's the case for the rebound. So then that's how I end up having high speed bump, low speed bump, high speed rebound, low speed rebound. You can see the equations here, and I'll go ahead and highlight this one. So it says choose. Choose is a function that allows me to and I'll go ahead and make another one down here. So the way that you would start out is choose. Choose allows for logical statements to be made. So that's where you can, it's kind of like saying if. It's an if statement in other types of software. If you highlight it here, right now the equation is invalid. If you highlight it, it'll give you the explanation of what it is. Okay. Oh my god. Every time that you break the equation, it won't work, but the choose function returns true part when the condition expression is true, otherwise returns a false part. So the parameters are condition, true part, false part. The first thing that you have to do is put a condition. So the conditional statement is the if the derivative of the filtered horsepower, high pass filtered suspension velocity position. So that's where we're doing our filter. Right now I think it's set to 2. I think that should be at 0.1. But I'll make the adjustments to the other ones. So if that case is true, and that's less than 0, so this is a bump, then go ahead and go with the following. So then in that case it'll display the derivative of the filtered, and this has to be consistent, so it has to be 0.1. the derivative of the high pass filter suspension position, which means velocity, will be displayed. If not, this is the comma, invalid. And then what the invalid does is that it won't put out any information. So you have to go choose, then you have to choose derivative, which is the differential function, filtered high pass, and then that's where you put in your suspension channel, not the math. Right now we're showing the front left, so you put your front left, you put a comma, you put your cutoff frequency, 0.1. That's that part. You have an awful lot. So this is the condition, so you go outside of it. That's 1 parenthesis, 2 parentheses. I believe we should be on this one. Less than 0, comma. So then you have to go to the derivative again. Derivative, comma, filter high pass, comma, suspension position from left, comma, 0.1, comma, and then the invalid, I just type it. It's very important that in this case it's invalid. The reason being that otherwise, the whole point of what I'm trying to do is that I'm going to calculate the mean value of the channel, and if you were to put otherwise 0 or otherwise 1 divided by 0, that's going to actually output a numerical value, and that's not going to work, because then that's going to ruin the statistical average. So that's no good. So it's never going to tell me that this expression is correct because I have this double expression here. But obviously you have to check that it says all channels are being displayed validly. So then you know you're okay. Press OK. 0.2. I think I'm going to go back and change this one back to 0.2. I must have decided that that was the ideal value for the cutoff frequency. So then once you've made that, let's go ahead and see what that looks like. Actually, we'll just use this plot. Let's move that up actually. Let's go ahead and separate what should we do? Should we separate bumps from rebounds? Yeah, let's do that. Let's see what this looks like. So you see that's broken up the plots now. So you see that these are only, the upper group is only showing negatives, and the lower one is only showing positives. So it's worked. We've managed to separate it. And now this is what the invalid does. You'll notice that there's data missing, that it's only plotting here and there. Why? Well, what did we ask it to do? We asked it to show otherwise invalid if the conditions weren't met. So what's information that's not being shown? There are cases where the data may be out of those bounds, obviously. The suspension position has to be both positive, but then it also has to be within the correct frequency. The other one was doing the same thing, the one that we showed earlier, but I guess it's just, you have to go in there and zoom in. But that's what actually, this is what happens when you break up the bump and the rebound. So like down here on the bottom graph, you see how it's not showing. If I had overlaid these, this would be perfectly continuous, because it's actually coming from the plot above. So you'll see this cursor jump up and down on the screen, So it leaves the rebound, it goes to bump, then it leaves and goes back to rebound. So if I actually overlay these and remove the group, I can't do that. If I go like this and move this one up, the entire thing should be displayed almost perfectly. You see that it does get a lot better. It just seems to have a small amount of discontinuity. The reason is probably just being that the frequency is just a slight bit off. Good. So do we want to display like this? No, this information is still kind of useless. The way that we want to display this is using the statistical mean, because then I want to actually have like a solid number for what I'm looking at. So then this is where I made these maths. So basically now we're ready to take the damper high speed bump and basically cause an average. So you go here to the functions again and you use stat mean. Now the thing about the stat mean is that you can't control the range that you're looking at. So this is stat mean, and what that means is that it's going to use your entire outing, including the period where you're stopped at the pits to the period that you're going to stop again in the pits. So you kind of have to do some logic to try to get that out of the way, because usually when we're looking at the damper histograms, I only highlight the actual laps that I did, basically only looking at the hot laps. What you're going to want to do is filter that out, even though you're averaging everything. So then this is where I throw in that logic statement. So you go to choose, which is our if statement again, and we're going to use the ground speed to take anything out of the equation. So I use ground speed, so I go over here, ground speed. If my ground speed is greater than 20 is what I put on the equation, then the following can be true. So if ground speed is greater than 20, then show me damper high speed bump. If not, invalid. So then what the equation is going to do is, obviously, you have all these points, data points, and it's going to be looking at the two pieces of data. It's almost as if like there was a little guy looking at the math, and then he's looking at it and he's comparing, and every single data point that he sees that the speed is greater than 20 kilometers per hour, he's going to go ahead and add that to his average. If not, it's not going to get calculated. So this is only going to output a single value. It's going to be an average, so you can't plot this in a time distance graph. We're just going to look at it numerically. But you play around with the speed, and anything outside of it is going to throw it out, including if there's a part of a lap that you did that, maybe there's a really slow hairpin or something like that. It's going to dump that information out too. So then so then after that, what we're averaging is the damper high speed bump that we made for the front left, and then you put comma, and then you type in invalid, and you have to put the double parentheses, and then that's it. So what does that look like? We'll move that to the side, and we're going to make some gauges, because I like the numeric gauges. Actually, I guess just for the sake of time, we're not going to do it in gauge form. We're going to do something different. We're going to, we are going to do a gauge, but we're going to do a channel list. So then we're going to go ahead and list out these. No, actually, that's not the right one. Stat. Then mean, sorry. That's the name of the channel that we're looking for. These are the channels we're looking for. Go ahead. This is the right one. The value is irrelevant. Oop. Don't want to show that. Okay. So there we have it. So it doesn't matter what part of the lap you select, it doesn't change at all. And we have this really cool way of comparing it. Now I want to go ahead and wonder if there's any outings that I did a different lap on with like different damper values. But what can we see out of here? Well, we can see now that the bump, the average velocity was minus 38.47 millimeters per second. The low speed, the average was 3.54. The rebound, the average was 31.8, and so on. That's pretty cool. The intent of this, I think, is going to be to see basically small adjustments in the damping and see how that affects this low speed and high speed and the bump and the rebound. This may help people see, more clearly the adjustments, because I think there's a little bit of a cross here with looking at the histogram, where it can be a little bit of a challenge. Did I break this? This is broken now. That's funny. So I think it's a little bit interesting that the way that it works is that visually it kind of goes backwards, and you can see that the plot actually, as the speed goes up, the plot gets actually kind of wider and less steep. Basically, if you were to see a really sharp spike in this damper histogram, your average values would actually get smaller. And if this, say the 30 average was actually much higher value, like 40, 50, this line, this hump would look pretty flat. So that's kind of confusing. It's kind of like inverse in that way. These numerical values here, I think, may prove to be helpful. But we can go a little bit further than this as well, because when you're setting it up, obviously one thing that we care about is, I think, one thing is just overall grip, which is the high speed. In case of you're like in a really bumpy track, you could be losing grip and making the car unstable by the way that it goes over the undulation. Basically, you could have your rear suspension getting light, and maybe the front has a lot of grip and the rear is bouncing. You're gonna be putting the car in an unstable platform. That's obviously not ideal. So you want to be able to visualize that. But the other thing is just about car setup balance. You want to be able to make those adjustments, like I said earlier, where if you're understeering on entry or understeering on exit, if you're understeering on corner exit on throttle, you're going to want to slow down the weight transfer. You're going to want to actually delay the weight leaving the front tires and going to the rear. So how do we look at that? Well, there's still more that we can do. So I made a couple of channels here for on throttle, and I believe I made some on brake as well. Okay, so then so it's basically, this is going one step further, like taking the information and only just looking at it when the car is on the throttle or on the brakes. So let's go ahead and see how we did that. For on throttle, again, we're looking just at the mean, so we're going to be putting out a number. And I added, it's the same conditional statement. Basically, I made a copy paste, but in this case, I added ground speed, which is, well, actually that's the same thing that it was before. But on top of that condition, I added G-force longitudinal. And in this case, what it's going to be looking for is that the way that I'm telling it is like, I only want to only show me and calculate the average for when the car is on the brakes. How do you figure out that the car's on the brakes? Well, I mean, really, not necessarily on the brakes. When the car is diving in a very strong manner. So the only way that I thought of, like I could have put whenever I'm using the brakes, but I could also use the brakes very lightly. Whenever I'm using the brakes, maybe like at 100%. No, not necessarily, because then it's going to be cutting it off a little bit too early. what I decided to go with was whenever the longitudinal G is greater than 0.4, should we be negative? I might have to fix that. But whenever the longitudinal G is greater than 0.4, then you can go ahead and calculate the high speed bump on the front left. Oh, this is on throttle, so that makes sense. So we're looking at the on throttle version of this, and then we should put the units. So this is a high speed bump, high speed, so that's speed. So we can put S and look for speed, and it should be in millimeters per second. Millimeters per second. Okay. So sorry, this is when we're on the gas. So I looked at the accelerations, and we're really only when the car's really rocking back and accelerating hard. That's the only moment. Once you're actually up to speed and accelerating down the straightaway, your longitudinal G actually decreases, usually kind of below this threshold. Unless it depends on the car that you're driving, of course. So I kind of set this up for a GT3 car. So this is what we're going to use it. So 0.4 was a good cutoff. And then for the brakes, it was a similar thing where it's ground speed and the and function is here. This is logical and, logical or. This is bitwise and, not equal to, like you have all these tools here on the bottom that you can insert. So this is the and, so this is the G-force long, and this is for, so this is going to be negative, and this is for when this is less than 0.5. Negative 0.5. Let's double check that. Well, how do we check that? We're going to go to our chassis, I think. No, did I have suspension had it? So when are we on the brakes? When it's like -2. So what we want it to be is when it's like less than -0.5. Should be negative. You see, you have to double check these things. So the less than is correct, but it's just going to calculate when it's less than positive 0.5. We want to say less than -0.5. I have to change all of these less than -0.5. And that's going to give me a mean value for everything when we're on the brakes. So let's go ahead and try to get a number value for that. What did I say it was called mean? And it's on the brakes. Again, this is not perfect. Okay, so we have slightly different numbers this time. You can see that how they compare. This is on the brakes actually. So let's make another one that's for the throttle. So this is for the throttle, and you can see that the values are different. They were very balanced before, 33.6, -33.5, that's extremely balanced, and then the high speed bump and rebound, not necessarily that balanced. That could have been a little bit more balanced. I would have also made the same judgment out of maybe, let's see what I would have said about it. it's hard to see whether I would have deemed it to also have been unbalanced visually this way. But we can see before, like here, if you go ahead and make a run, you may be able to see the difference change here, and you might be able to make this come together. Maybe you don't need to. Like, I mean, there is a point where the values are close enough to each other. But you can see on the brake and off on the throttle performance is quite different as well, though. You can see the average velocities were relatively balanced on the throttle, but on the brake here, that's a big difference. That's a big jump. It's almost twice as fast on the rebound on the low speed rebound as it is on the low speed bump. So what does that mean? That means that the car is definitely diving the nose really quickly. No, sorry, very slowly under braking. It's a slow weight transfer to the front tires, but on the rebound, it's really quick. So then that's going to make the car a little bit more understeery. That's going to make the car turn in maybe a little bit sharper. No, it's the opposite. It's actually going to slow down that. And this is the front left tire. So if it's slowing down the speed, it may actually, you know, kind of promote a little bit of understeer on the entry. It could also cause a little bit of brake lockup. It could also just at the same time slowing that down. Will it hurt or help? Changes of direction. GT3 cars have a lot of roll in them, so I think it would actually help if you had the slower movement and more damping. Conversely, you have the 4 millimeters per second on the low speed rebound, so that means that the front rebound is releasing the front tires really quickly, much faster than the other case. So then that means that if you look at the rear compression, maybe that's also doesn't have a lot of damping in it, so it's definitely rocking back quite hard. That's a case that's going to definitely help the car, like leaving the hairpin and also leaving the chicane before the front straightaway. So this is interesting information. There's different ways that you could display this, and I think that this could end up helping in the case where you're going to want to make the adjustment changes. And now actually, you know, we want to prove that this works. So this video was just intended to go ahead and talk about how to set up these channels. In review, I showed you guys that that you can separate the suspension position and show using filters, and I showed you guys how to use the filter to separate out the high speed and the low speed adjustment on the suspension. Then we turned that into a velocity using the derivative. From there, we made a mean using the entire run so that I could output just a solid numerical value, and then that I can, you know, see quite easily. From there, we went ahead and made a on throttle and on brake split of the information. So now we're kind of like filtering down even more. So we're only displaying the mean when we're either accelerating kind of like on the high end and we're deleting most of the information off of the average, just throwing away all that information, and we're just taking in that and averaging that information. And then also the same on the brake whenever there's a really strong dive on the car from deceleration. That's when we're taking that information in. Maybe, hopefully, the idea is that this will help make damper adjustments a little bit more easy to see. The truth test is going to be if you can look at the same setup from 2 different runs and the numbers are pretty much identical, that'll give us repeatability. And then if you go ahead and make a damper adjustment, can you see it here? So if it's repeatable and you don't change the setup and you just, you know, do a different run, usually it's bad when you get different results for the same input. But if you go ahead and you do the same setup, you do 2-3 different runs, and every time you get the same results on these statistical means, as long as you do the same number of laps, you should be okay. Then we make the adjustment, and then we see a different value. I'm going to go ahead and finish playing with these and making the rest for the front right, the rear left, and the rear right, and then I'm going to set it up where it's visually better, and then I'm going to do those tests. So that's going to be in the next video. We're going to go ahead and try to use these new bits of math channels, and we're going to put them to a test to see if they work and how to use them. But we set them up correctly. Definitely now I think it's right, and we're going to see how they work. So I hope you watch this video. Go ahead and subscribe for my next upload, where we're going to go ahead and analyze these. And then after this, we're going to be working on some other cool stuff that I've come up with. So we're definitely going to be kicking it up a notch with Motec and doing some data analysis. And I'm going to be teaching you guys how to play with more of the math stuff and how to visualize and make your setup changes and driver analysis, and how to basically set up your worksheets so that they look a little bit more visually appealing instead of just daunting and scary. So until next time, you guys, thank you for watching.